So I'll just contextualize this whole initiative, and then my colleague Rohit Singh will come in and he'll give a brief presentation on our findings. And Aaditeshwar Seth from IIT will also, there was a part of the stuff IIT had done in terms of data measurements. So that is the context. So I'll quickly come to the main project background. So the basic idea was that as CUTS, which I represent, which stands for Consumer Unity and Trust Society, we are a consumer group. The origin of this initiative was the fact that, while there's been a lot of debate happening on net neutrality and financial inclusion and data, I think one thing which somehow is being missed out in this whole larger debate is the quality of service, and the quality of service in terms of what is being provided to the consumers at the end of the day. And that is something what has been emphasized by the opening statements. So that was the purpose, and that what we did was, as a trigger, apart from doing a lot of research which one does on the desk, we actually wanted to get down to the ground and talk to the consumers in terms of understanding what is their perception when it comes to quality of service. In real sense, testing the grounds in terms of what are the experiences, challenges consumers are facing when it comes to quality of service in the mobile internet services. So our focus was only on mobile internet services and not in the general, telecom services which are being provided. So as part of this initiative, what we did was a pilot project, keeping in mind various constraints, challenges and resources. We were able to do a consumer survey in 3 states. Which was Rajasthan, West Bengal and the NCR and Delhi. So a part of the work was done by CUTS in terms of doing a consumer survey, which was one-to-one survey. It was based on a structured questionnaire, trying to understand and map the consumer's perception and challenges when it comes to quality of service. And a part of the study was undertaken by IIT Delhi, which was more on the data measurements, which Aaditeshwar will speak about. So that was largely the trigger behind us in terms of getting down to the ground and really in trying to test the waters and engaging with the consumers. So as part of this initiative, what we did was we were able to capture close to around 730 consumers. While we understand that sample size is very low, it's not representative of the state. The challenges were that we also had some resource constraints and time. So that's why we said it's a pilot study. We wanted to test the waters, and the idea is that we want to build on this study and we want to take it to the next level. Some of the perceptions which we were able to capture, that would be shared by my colleague Rohit. And so that was the origin behind the study. And with that, maybe first Aaditeshwar, you might want to come in before, and then Rohit can come in on the perception survey. Aditeshwar.
Thanks. It's amazing to be getting an audience with all of you today. So this is a project actually that we started almost 3 years back, aimed at measuring the quality of service which the actual end consumer is experiencing. Right. So now we completely understand the concern of mobility over here. So that's why the way we set up this entire experiment was that we actually put up stationary nodes in about 20 locations in rural as well as urban areas. And these stationary nodes were actually a small netbook. We built an entire measurement suite which would run on this netbook 24/7, and it would probe different telecom providers. So simultaneously it would probe 3 telecom providers by constantly sending data, downloading data, and we measured basic things like the availability, that how often was it able to connect to the network, download and upload speeds, latency, and then several other network parameters which we found were interesting and not exactly as expected. So this study was done in about 20 locations. Most of the providers were GSM based. We also looked at Reliance, which was doing it on CDMA. And we did both 2G as well as 3G measurements over this period. So these are just some very quick results. Right? So on availability, the y-axis is the percentage value of how often the modem was able to successfully connect to the network. And the values are actually quite low, on average 60 to 70%, but in some locations it was as low as 35%. So these measurements actually were done over a continuous period of at least 3 months at each location. So these are not point values at a particular point in time, but averaged across the entire 3 months.
It does a handshake, then it goes down, then it does a handshake again. So that's how we're testing availability.
Yeah. So basically, we're trying to see that the device is always constantly trying to connect. When it's connected, it starts the download and upload test.
Would you not get 100%?
No, in fact, it was
Even
the.
at night.
In fact, in some locations, we had a very consistent pattern that connectivity in the night was zero, and that actually we feel was an artifact because many of these rural locations have their towers running on gensets, and the towers are actually powered off probably, or whatever the 2G base station was actually powered off. So we also noticed that in a couple of locations. The next thing we tracked was download and upload bandwidth, and here one of the main observations was that it's actually much lower than the advertised values. So this is on 2G. Similarly, we did it on 3G. So one of the common points which Ajay also sort of made was that what's the promise being made to the consumers? Because very often the kind of advertising that is being done is that it's promising to the consumers that you'll get up to 21 Mbps of bandwidth, right? But that's actually just a theoretical maximum. In practice, that bandwidth is shared across many users, so what they end up getting is much lower. Right, so I mean, as you can see, right, the advertise is 14 Mbps or 21 Mbps, but we're hardly between max is Airtel at 2.5 Mbps, right? We also measured latency. Then what we actually also tried to do is that we tried to compare it with the values that were reported to TRAI. Now these values reported to TRAI are actually at the circle level over a quarter, right? Because these are quarterly reports. Our measurements are at a specific location. And interestingly, we found that throughput and latency values that we had measured were roughly tallying with the kind of values that the providers had reported. But very interestingly, the availability value was widely divergent. So if you look at the part marked red, so the reported value by pretty much all the operators from that particular circle was 100%, while the actual observed was much lower. So this we feel is actually an artifact of the methodology that the providers are pursuing to provide this data. Because we actually measured it from the end device, but what it seems is that what the providers are actually providing is the measurement from within their network, right? So that of course is going to be more reliable, but the actual end consumer is experiencing a much lower availability, right? So there's a methodology problem over here that what's the methodology that's being prescribed to the operators, that probably needs to be revised, at least for availability. Very interestingly, one other aspect that we saw was that especially if you're downloading large files, then suddenly the download gets stalled, and it gets stalled for almost 40 to 60 seconds. And what we found is that so those packets are actually not lost, they're actually stuck at an intermediate gateway or at the base station buffers. And why that is actually happening is that the device is constantly trying to, if we tested on some devices which are just set to use only 2G, some devices which were set to use 2G or 3G, whichever is the better one available. So especially in the devices which were trying to use 3G, there was a very rapid churn that the devices were being dumped off to 2G, and then they would stay in 2G for a while, they would again try to connect to 3G, but then they'll stay in 3G for a while and then again get dumped back. And what was basically happening because of this switching is that the TCP connections that were going on for downloads. So the switching is happening at the network layer, but it affects the download, because those downloads actually, I mean, it's a protocol artifact. The connection completely backs off. So basically, I mean, long story short, what the end user actually experiences is that, especially if you're downloading large files, suddenly the connection will go silent for 40 to 60 seconds, then it will try to pick up. And the interesting part was that it's different at different locations, right? So which essentially points to a network configuration aspect over here. So just to summarize,
please explain why is it network configuration issue?
Because I mean, we're not seeing a consistent pattern. Different locations are working at different levels of performance over here. So that's why we feel that it's actually, I mean, if the configuration can be improved, it's working fine in some locations, but it's not working fine in some other locations. And I mean, there's no sort of correlation of rural versus urban. And all the locations also that we chose were, we placed the devices at points where the signal strength was high. So that was controlled for in these experiments. So that's why, I mean, we feel that some of these aspects, like this this hysteresis which happens in switching between one network to the other. Another aspect on which I didn't cover in the slides, another aspect is on latency, where we also found that the networks where latency is high are also the ones where large buffers have been provisioned. And this is a well-known issue in networks, a problem called buffer bloat, which happens that if you have large buffers, then it prevents packet drops, but it has a side effect that it also leads to much larger latencies, especially for interactive connections. So again, we found that some providers in some locations were doing fine, which means the buffers were sized properly at those locations, but in other places there were configuration problems, it seems like. I mean, we of course don't know what the values are configured inside the network. So some of the key points that we wanted to make was that in terms of the values that the providers are reporting to TRAI, I think a deeper reflection is required to figure out a better methodology, so that it's actually more reflective of the end users, the performance that the end user is experiencing. The second is more on consumer awareness and sort of this rights issue that what are you promising to the consumers at the end of the day, right? So that if we can have, Rohit will probably talk more about this, but just more consumer awareness that could be built. One way is through nutrition labels, which are essentially making the consumers aware that okay, there's something known as throughput or bandwidth, there's something known as latency, right? Just like how on food packages we have carbohydrate and protein content. So at least people are coming to know that okay, there's something known as all these different metrics. So the consumer awareness issue, and then hopefully, I mean, consumers once they know, they'll be more demanding of their rights. The third aspect, basically on network configurations, right? So our feeling is that if the telcos can actually just configure the networks better, I think we might see a substantial improvement in performance. Because at least on latency issues like buffer sizes and then on the switching, we are seeing a wide variance, and at least from the outside, there's no perceptible way of how it's being explained. So those are some of the points that we discovered. So overall study took about 1.5 to 2 years in different locations over time.
So Udai and Adi have talked about most of the things, the issues and everything. I'll just take you through the findings or what we could gather out of the responses that we gathered from the survey. To start with, I'll just briefly describe for those who don't know about the QoS regulations by TRAI. TRAI in 2012 came out with a regulation that sets out various technical parameters on which the quality of service is gauged. Further in 2014, they came out with another amendment that mandates operators to publish a minimum download speed, and this speed has to be delivered not less than 80% of the time. However, the numerous issues that we see throughout our day regarding the speeds and the network availability, that becomes a challenge for the consumers. So we decided to go at the ground and gather evidences on how the quality is like. So these are the actual results. If you'll see, so we had covered West Bengal, Rajasthan and NCR as a part of our survey. So here we can see is that apart from Rajasthan, West Bengal and NCR suggest almost the same pattern, where more than half of the respondents said that their satisfaction regarding the quality of services was either average or lesser than that. So only for Rajasthan as a region, the situation was even worse, where only 27% said that it was either good or very good. Remaining percentage said that it was average or below average. However, when the quality of service in itself is poor, the satisfaction rating vis-a-vis the cost that the consumer pays for it goes down. So this can be seen that this is very relevant to the satisfaction rating vis-a-vis the QoS. We will see West Bengal and NCR highlight the same pattern, where only 33%, 32% people said that the cost that they bear is valid, is reasonable enough for the QoS that is being delivered to them. However, in case of Rajasthan, it again drops down to 15% of the people who said that it is actually they are being charged reasonably for the service, the quality of service that was being provided to them. Moving further, as Mr. Sharma also talked about a few of the technical parameters on which the quality can be gauged, So we try to gauge what all parameters do the consumer know about their mobile internet plans. We talk about the data usage limit. We also talk about speeds, the throughput, the bandwidth. It was interesting to know that most of the people knew about their data usage limit because that is how the internet plans are being advertised. So you'll get 300 MB of data pack, 1 GB, 2 GB. So people had a knowledge about their data usage limit. However, they still perceived that they were not being correctly charged for the data they consume. So half of the population across West Bengal and NCR said, half of the population said they were correctly being charged and half said they were incorrectly being charged for. In Rajasthan again, there was a difference between the two where only 1/3 of the population, less than even 1/3 said they were being correctly charged. Maximum respondents said that they were incorrectly being charged for their data services. What we could gather from the responses is that people do get confused between speed and bandwidth. So we tried explaining what is the difference between speed and bandwidth. Interestingly, most of the people across the three regions did not know what bandwidth actually meant. Mr. Sharma had highlighted the importance of bandwidth. It's a very important parameter talking about internet performance. But then seldom do the operators publish this information on their websites or at the point of sales, which becomes an issue. So there are many studies which highlight that the quality of experience is based on the information that you disclose to the consumer. If you will disclose the complete set of information, the QoE, the quality of experience was high, which is not the case here. We further probed the respondents if given for those who are unaware of the bandwidth, the term. We tried to ask them, would they be interested to know about this particular information after they got to know about what exactly bandwidth meant and how it impacted their internet services. Almost every respondent said that they wanted to know more about bandwidth. So probably this is one thing, this information should be disclosed to the consumers at the point of sales. And also this means that this might be one of the parameters which reflects in the lower satisfaction of the consumers regarding their data services. Moving further, this was again a question that we had asked our respondents about their awareness about TRAI. It seems that New Delhi and NCR people are more aware about the TRAI because of its daily-based presence. However, interestingly, the figures did not match when we talk about people in West Bengal or Rajasthan. So it does suggest that TRAI needs to have more awareness in regional centers as well. This was one thing. So there should be, as we know, for data services, there are no penalty provisions for the operators. There are QoS regulations in place, but there are no penalty provisions. There are penalty provisions for calling and other services. The only exclusion is the data services. So we ask the respondents if there be penalty provisions, would that act as a deterrent for the operators? Would that compel the operators to enhance their quality of services? Almost everybody responded in affirmation that there should be penalties in place. However, we can have a round of discussion on these lines. Would penalty be actually good enough to promote a betterment of quality of services? Moving further, in Brazil, there is a ranking mechanism of operators on quality of services. For each region, the operators are ranked in a quarter. So, can such a mechanism help the consumer choose between the services, or would this also help to enhance the competition between the operators and again help motivate them to enhance their quality of services? Again, most of the respondents said that there should be a ranking system mechanism in place. Again, a subject that we can talk more about at our panel discussion. So it can be summarized as consumers are really not satisfied with the quality of service being delivered to them, and also they are not satisfied with the cost that they are bearing. They are aware about their data limit, however, they still feel they are not correctly being charged for it. There is limited understanding on the QoS parameters, the technical parameters in specific, which are critical to the performance of internet services. The terms as bandwidth, so the complete information should be disclosed. These technical parameters, which are laid down in the quality of services regulation, they should be provided to the consumer at the point of sales, or if a consumer is interested to know about it, probably these things can be published on their websites as well. TRI's awareness needs further improvement in regional places where there is low visibility of TRI, and consumers are totally in favor of penalty provision and ranking mechanisms for the operators. So these are few suggestions from our end. What TRI can possibly do is that again revisiting and effective implementation of the QoS regulation. So as a consumer perception, what we gauged is that consumers are not unhappy, so quality of service is down. So probably a quick revisit of the regulations can be done, and more efficient implementation can be done. Another thing is Adi also talked about nutrition label. So nutrition label, like we have on packaged food products, such a standard way of publishing the complete set of information can be mandated for internet services, which will possibly enhance the quality of experience. There can be a ranking mechanism as we talked about, and penalty provisions in case the operators breach on their QoS benchmarks as stated in the regulations. For the operators or the internet service providers, they should ideally be disclosing a complete set of information to the consumers. It depends on it can be either disclosed as a part of the packet or by the merchant or available on their website. And this is already implemented. While we were doing the study, the TRI was thinking about getting this notification regulation out. So this is being implemented. However, a more real-time and session-based notification can also further help in the consumer knowing how much of the usage has been done, and they can effectively use their quota of data pack. There can be also a role played by non-state actors. So the CSOs which are registered with TRI can be further empowered, providing them technical know-how, how can they be watched out to the quality of services in particular regions, and they can also voice their consumer concerns. There can be collaboration with the universities, with the non-state actors like universities like IITs can provide the basic technical know-how, which can help in bringing the evidence-based advocacy in case there is any drop in the quality of services. So the issues that we can discuss further at the panel, Mr. Shah, Dr. Shah, these things can be taken up. So the penalty provisions, would they really act as a deterrent? Should there be a ranking system? Would that really help in bettering the QoS? Can India also adopt a strategy for nutrition label internet services for complete information disclosure? And how can we better capacitate the non-state actors so that they can be better watched out for the quality of services?